middle school, Nisqually Middle School, something like that. The city of Lacey really wants to have the rack in the city limits, but they can't get there without, you know, boxing in all that stuff that's to the northwest, all the stuff we've been talking about. Because you can't just go grab stuff and start closing, you know, the hoops around it or whatever, and then just leave this big donut in the middle. So that's what they're trying to figure out, is like how much, what's the balance between us annexing the retail and having to service the residential?
Sure.
Right, and how much police calls do we get from the residential, and how many new cops will we need to respond to that stuff, and will the revenue offset the cost for that? Right, and then some of it just is not a cost factor, it's our water quality is failing, and we need to respond to that, and we need to do that through sewer connections and, you know, that kind of thing. So it's a very, very complicated thing, probably less complicated than the Spokane Airport example, where a lot of that's, you know, open space.
So here's one question for you. Is like, okay, someplace like Southern California, where you like have a county and it goes like city, and then there's a road, and then the next city starts, and it's that way through the whole thing. The county actually would have very few funds.
Yeah, I don't know how the different states handle that.
Oh, okay.
I don't
That's
know
what
if,
you're
like,
saying, right? Like they're making their way towards bankruptcy.
here, I don't know about an example in like
I see.
Oregon or Idaho or California, how that works, with what the county's rules are. I know a lot of states aren't as reliant on sales tax as Washington, right? They have
That's true,
income
they have
tax.
income tax, right?
So, you know, if they have an income tax, it really doesn't matter what land we have, it's just we want really high priced houses and rich people living in them, right?
Sure.
I don't know how counties do, but GMA, I call counties like zombies, like they're dead and they just don't know it yet. I just don't think that there's a way that they're ever gonna be able to get out from underneath this like slow drip of, you know, of funds. Because things always cost more, right? And people have, one of the frustrations I think is people who live in rural areas who expect urban level services. You're pissed off because you can't get Wi-Fi. Your Wi-Fi signal, your internet signal, or your streaming speed is down low, but you're living out, you know, on the back 40 out behind a mountain, you know, and you have no neighbors, so you can't have both.
Right.
A lot of times, and the expectations of people who live in the rural areas has been elevated, where they expect the same type of quick response.
Fire
And I expect the garbage guy to come, and how come you guys don't have recycling, and why I gotta take my stuff to the junkyard, you know, on my own, or the landfill. And that's a stereotype and a little bit of an oversimplification, but you know what I mean. People just have expectations that I'm 5 minutes away from something, I should be able to have a decent grocery store way out here. It's like, well, you chose to live out there, you're paying less for what you got. There's trade-offs.
Just didn't think about all those things before.
Correct, yeah, people who drive to qualify don't realize they're spending, you know, $40,000 in transportation fees on gas and insurance and car replacement over the life of this, and so it looked like it was a good value when we went to buy this house, and you add up all the lost time and everything else, and it's maybe not as good a value as you thought. So annexation is tough, it doesn't get done as much, it's getting to be done a lot more because everything's tightening up, right? And as you know, as things cost more, people are looking for ways to pay for that, and a lot of it is through, you know, development. If a development is in your jurisdiction at the time of development, you get permit fees, right, or impact fees, or whatever else that happens. One of the things in this Lacey example that they're trying to figure out is a revenue share. So like, we won't go from today that's yours, and now it's all mine this day, right, and you have 0 and I have 100, right? They're gonna try to do this like over time. We're gonna, even after we annex it, we'll have this, like, wean you off of this.
So it's almost like a handoff.
Yeah. An agreement about how we're gonna share this, you know, and, you know, you keep having your sheriffs respond to these incidences, and we'll share some of the revenue for you to offset that cost while we spin up a new officer, and once she's ready to go, then she can come in and relieve that sheriff. That's how it's supposed to happen. So the next page I won't talk about, but it's just, again, the process that you would hold, you have a role in this. You know, you get to decide whether you're going to accept, reject, or modify the proposal, the annexation petition that or proposal that comes in. You have a public hearing, you forward a recommendation to the council does the same thing, then they send the application materials to the boundary review board, they get like 45 days to review. If it's pretty straightforward, because it's an annexation less than 10 acres, according to state law, RCW 3693-110, they can waive the time frame and just approve it. Because if you have a willing, it's like, you know, if you have a willing buyer and a willing seller, like why do we need to spend all this time asking if there's anybody who opposes it? And again, the UGA is supposed to kind of signal to everybody, like, this is gonna be part of the city.
Sure, right.
If it's not gonna be part of the city.
That's your
then-
warning.
Then take it out.
Yeah.
And again, that UGA is supposed to be for your 20-year growth, so if you're growing fast, you're gonna have to add UGA, because you're now out of capacity, and if you stagnate, and you thought you were gonna grow, then maybe you need to shrink your UGA. And anytime you make those changes, people freak out, right? You told me I was gonna be a part of the city, now you're changing it, so there's ways to figure out how to use a methodology to decide what people are gonna end up if they're back in the county, not in the UGA.
Well, you said something about a partial UGA, maybe.
Well, there's the property that's south of the park that I've always wondered why in the world is this is up on the hill above the city park. It's in forest, I believe it's designated for forest use right now. It's been replanted. It just seems like even if it would be hard to bring utilities up there, for one thing, I mean, I think, maybe. And even if you did, there would be probably big lots and big houses, and it would just be kind of not really that worthwhile.
Like a pool.
Yeah. I mean,
Oh, and then these are those this is that property that's got all those little small units,
those weird
that little town.
Yeah.
That's right in here, right?
yeah, I think so, yeah. Well, no, that one is, down here. Let's see, where's the? I think this is the pool, so it's like right there. It's on the base of the hill, and this is up on top of the hill, so if you walk up the trail above the quarry pool.
Oh, so that place is already, that one that we're talking about is probably already in Tenino.
I don't know, it's close. I'm not sure if it is.
Already got that,
Actually, it doesn't.
Yeah, I know. A lot of renovation though.
A little bit.
I still haven't seen them.
I've only seen them from the road. I've heard.
I can't even see them on an aerial photo.
Those little houses, yeah, they're pretty much swallowed up by the
bushes.
weeds.
Apparently at one point in time it was nice.
They filmed a movie there or something, like that's, supposedly, that's what I heard, why
We
they
need to go to
built
the
it.
bottom of this.
They built it
Because,
for some kind of a,
really,
I think I remember somebody saying it was for like a horror movie or like somebody's ghost story movie or some kind of thing.
Describing it, it seems fun.
Yeah, it's a bunch of little replicas of like a little church, you know, but really small, like,
and kind of a little bit maybe western, like old,
yeah.
like a lot of.
I've never really walked over there beyond part of this.
10 tax, that's what we're breaking. One of the things about, those stupid group mails where everyone gives a thumbs up, really, you're
Oh, yeah.
texting the whole thing back to me again, cause someone goes like this,
Yeah.
John
Oh,
liked
yeah.
your post, Jill liked John's thumbs up.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
This is gonna be my life.
Exactly. What was I gonna mention? One of the hard things about long-term land use planning is that most people want growth to happen in like existing lots, but it's slow, it's not a lot of units, and it's expensive. So how most cities grow is through this like edge development, right? Meadows, stuff on park.
It's expensive because you're not building like tin houses just.
Yeah, so like my
Mobilizing
mobilization
whenever
cost
for
for
one.
this little,
Yeah, I
6,000
see.
square foot lot is almost the same as my mobilization cost for a big, 30-unit subdivision, right? And some stuff has flat fees just for application it's $1,200. It's like, well, it's 2 units versus 20 units, it's
Oh, I
the
see.
same, right? So it's just like the smaller house you build, the more per square foot it costs. But if you build a big, most of the time you build a really big structure, it's a lot cheaper per square foot. It's
Right.
more expensive overall, but, it's like
That
buying
makes
at bulk
sense.
at Costco, right? You buy
Right,
a lot,
right.
36 rolls of toilet paper, they're only 50 cents a roll. You buy 4 rolls at Safeway and they're 80 cents a roll.
That makes sense.
So it's hard to get the growth that you want, and who knows what West Tenino's gonna do, but there's gopher mounds out there, but there's options and opportunities for that. Miles sand and gravel isn't gonna dig this thing out forever. There's potential for, when gravel companies are done doing their thing, they have to remediate this site, right? So
Fill it back.
they do stuff, they don't always fill it back in, cause there's not enough materials to
To
do
put
that. I
back
mean, they
that you
pulled it
took
all
out,
out,
right,
exactly,
right,
we're
right.
gonna get all that material back to fill it back up, right?
Different pits.
Fill with gravel again.
So most of the time, it's like a lake or a water feature.
Oh, wow.
So, IPAT, which is, the coal mine that was up in Centralia, above Centralia. If you look at aerial photos, there's big lakes up there because they pulled coal out, they strip mine coal for, 30, 40 years, and they've got big holes in the ground.
You're talking about just off of I-5?
No,
Like,
not up in the hill above,
Yeah. Tano, it's the town of Tano, it's
Yeah,
like one
if you-
house.
If you ever looked up in the distance and you could see the smoke or the
Cloud
steam
factory.
coming
Yeah,
off that,
yeah.
that's where it's at, it's a steam plant.
Hamburger.
Yep.
Yeah, way
What's
up
the
there.
big coal burning plant? They're gonna put some wind up there, wind power up there now on the
Yeah, they're-
Lewis County side. It looks like a moonscape though, parts of it. I mean, it looks like strip mining. I
Yeah,
think.
so when they do that, they go back and they vegetate it and they fix the shoreline so it's not all jagged, they're
Totally.
gonna make it look nice, and there's a whole plan that they have to do when they do that. I don't know, I can't remember where they get their permits with, but, it's probably a combination, like ecology and Fish and Wildlife and DNR, like everybody gets their pound of flesh.
Doesn't it come on water of the state?
Probably, but when they're done with it, they basically like do that, right? We're done, we're out, and there may be some monitoring long-term so that, but they basically are pulling all the pollutants out and everything.
So-
And eventually that site will look like that.
So then does that get turned in, can that be turned into like waterfront residential lots?
Yeah,
See,
there's
that's-
one in the Skookumchuck Valley that I think Todd Hanson was developing. You can hardly see it if you drive down Skookumchuck Valley Road. It's on the right-hand side. On the south side, there's like a line of blackberries and a bit of a mound. But then he was gonna build a bunch of houses there, I thought, at one point.
So if you have your phones and you can pull up an aerial, if you've seen, the Miles Sand and Gravel site, you can kinda get a sense for what we're talking about, but, and this is, if you're gonna be in town for the next, generation, 20, 30 years, eventually, they're gonna run out of gravel, and they're just gonna, they'll still have sand and gravel out on the site, it just won't be economical to pull it out anymore, right? And they won't renew their mining permit with the county, and, they'll spend some time remediating it, and then they'll
I think there are
look.
like depth restrictions on, you
Yeah.
can't just pull it out forever,
Right.
even if it was.
Right, still productive,
Yeah.
right? There's and I'm not a mining expert, I've talked to them about their permits because I was working on the Ag Park site.
That's gonna be a real pretty lake.
Yeah, so my point with that is that infill's challenging, expensive, and slow. It still has to happen, and I think you still wanna provide options for people who want that kind of, residential, style,
Mhm.
right? But very few people raise a family of 6 in downtown Seattle. It's just not the American dream, right? And so bigger families go into places where they can have a dog and put their kids in the backyard with a fence and let them do their thing, right? So eventually, there'll be development pressure on the mile sand and gravel site, once they've remediated it.
But as a city, we get very little money for residential development, so we want more land that could go commercial, is that,
Right.
I mean,
Or we're hoping that these people contribute to downtown.
sure.
Right, and, yeah, right.
I'm just thinking in terms of like setting a UGA boundary or something, I guess you try and look for some kind of mix
Yeah.
of things that you're pretty sure will be commercial at some point.
But let's say that West Tenino was good ground and ready to be developed and it was having development pressures. The way that this is set up in the comp plan and the zoning code, it has to be a mix of uses, not mixed use, which means, ground floor retail and upper store residential, but mix of uses,
Yeah.
just like town is, right?
They need to come
I
up
mean,
with
look-
like a
look at the-
master
Look at the
plan
size,
and all
the size difference. I mean, it basically doubled the city's size
Yeah,
by
no
adding
doubt.
West Tenino. So this, if it was fully productive or capable of absorbing growth, would last for forever, the foreseeable future, but it's not, right? It's got hills on it, it's got pocket gopher, it's got a whole host of other undevelopable things, so it's more constrained. There's certainly going to be residential pressure on some portions of it because it doesn't have pocket gophers. It might be up on top of the hill, so it might be more expensive, but you'll need to get some type of mix of uses. And then the challenge for you as planning commissioners is, and the council's already said they don't want big boxes and that kind of thing, but that's how that works usually. Usually is, this is the type of land a Walmart or a Target comes, and then they suck all that vitality out of its core and pulls it over to the fringe. And
When
now,
they originally did that in like 2007 or so, that's what they wanted, box stores, that was like, and everybody was freaking out.
right,
Well, and then you end up like with a Shelton, where downtown Shelton is almost dried up and everything's up on the hill where the Walmart and the
Right.
Safeway are.
that's a good example.
Yeah.
Right, and then now you get development pressure around it, because people want a quick little trip across the street to Walmart, right?
And
And
so-
now you've got all your core and your growth over here, and your town just goes,
Dries
dries
up.
up, right?
So that's where we as a planning commission hope to figure out ways to develop this land that complements this,
Right.
So
And
it
that
still has
adds
the
to
grand
this,
vision. Yeah.
but doesn't take away from it. Which I like because an egg park is not direct competition to what we have down here. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
people would go to the egg park to visit the egg park, but they're not gonna go, you don't have that's a bad term, but you don't have like something there that takes away from something here.
Right.
Okay, cool.
Right.
That's cool stuff.
Do we need to look at the UGA at all, or is there any need to do that, or not really?
I don't know. I mean, you're allowed to amend your comp plan no more than once a year, unless it's an emergency. And so most cities have windows that say, hey, we're taking comp plan amendment applications. You wanna do that? Tell us what you wanna change. And then they close it, and then they process the applications, and that takes 6 to 7 months, and then they open the window again and do it again the next time.
And those are applications that are submitted by citizens.
Yep, or the city can do it itself.
Okay.
So, but what the city doesn't wanna do is amend the comp plan in March, and then have somebody come in July and say, I'm ready to amend the comp plan, cause we'll say, we'll see you in March.
Yeah.
We already did it this year.
Right.
Cause that same rule applies to the city as it does to the community. Cause the idea on the comp plan is that it's supposed to be a vision document. If you're changing your vision every 3 months, no one is tracking with that. Now, you can change your zoning code almost any time you want. You just follow the SEPA noticing requirements, but you could just constantly be changing things in the zoning map, and as long as it doesn't violate the comp plan. So changing, and real quickly, changing from single family to single family duplex, probably not a comp plan change, but changing from single family to industrial, that's a comp plan change, because your map's changed and your buildable lands are changed, and So depends on what kind of change you wanna do. So to answer your question directly, I don't know whether the UGA needs to change. That's an effort that would be related to, how much growth have we had, how have we accommodated that growth, and how much future growth can fit within our current, either our current corporate boundaries or within the UGA that we called out. And because you have such a large West Tenino UGA, I don't think there's a lot of, I don't know that it would pass the sniff test to say, we need new UGA. You could change it, you know, you could add and subtract probably, or if you made a good case that 75% of that is undevelopable because it has mapped and known gopher habitat. I mean, you guys all know this whole thing's
Right.
off the table.
Yeah.
This is probably off the table. This stuff on the hill, is that Davis Hill, is that what it's called?
No, lemon.
Lemon Hill, yeah, Lemon Hill, Davis is in Detroit. This could provide units, but, you know, it's steep up there, and I don't know how you're getting access up there, and so you're not getting,
Morningside is how people have traditionally mentioned.
you're not getting,
That high density like you
10
want.
units an acre.
Right.
That's the same thing I was thinking about that bit above the park too, I mean,
Yeah.
how many, however many.
So you do a calculation on how many units you think you could accommodate based on what you know about slopes and water and sewer and cost and, you know, some of that stuff. And then you'd say, oh, it turns out that we still have an expected demand of 125 units. And even if you were to infill at a reasonable market factor, and even if you were to build out Lemon Hill at a reasonable factor, you still have units left to go. And
We can't facilitate the demand.
we gotta find a spot for those, and now you're into it like, oh, well, we should start looking for, you know, new land. It turns out that if we take, you know, this and we cut it in half, we can accommodate an extra unit there, you know, wherever, like Miami Acres, if you were to run down here and, you know, even a third of these were to subdivide, you're gonna pick up your, you know, 100 acres, just, I mean, your 100 units that way, so it's all process. I don't wanna speculate about where to go, but until you know what you're happening with West Tenino, I think it's challenging to,
Yeah, we don't wanna make any rash moves until we figure out where, if it's possible for things to happen out there, or
Right.
to what degree.
because that, so water, John told you, water is coming to this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is, I know I'm marking on your map, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
That's where the water line's coming down to, and right now the water line's right, it's basically right over Scatter Creek. It's just right at Scatter Creek, so it's coming this whole distance, it's like 3,000 feet, almost a mile. And the sewer plant's right there, and they're gonna run a little sewer tap, like 300 feet of sewer. So now you have water out in front of your new West Tenino property where before it wasn't touching it.
Which makes that property a lot more desirable.
In the single family ES, that's environmentally sensitive, is that right? So in the middle here, is there even anything there right now?
Yeah, so that mobile home park I was talking about, that's, I'm gonna mark on this again,
Oh,
that's
okay.
right here.
That's where it is. Oh,
And that Howard Wheeler
Oh.
bit is in there
The
too.
Howard Wheeler piece is this yellow piece right here, and that piece right there.
And what was the Howard Wheeler again? What was he wanting to do?
Well, they went in and like pre-cleared some land thinking that they could put up houses.
I saw that they had it for sale for quite a while.
Yeah,
They just right past the
he just
bridge.
went in there and bulldozed
So
around.
he bought it and then
to-
took his dozer in and said, hey, I've got an idea for I'm reestablishing the road. And we're like, no, that's not the road. And there's a bunch of other things going on here. There's a little spring coming down off the hill. There's steeper slopes. There's floodplain and wetland buffers. So you can get a few houses in
Like the
there, but
number of
not like
houses was
9 like he was trying to get. It was
outrageous, yeah.
7. He was trying to 7.
So did
It was
the,
more than that.
did the brakes
Yeah,
go down on that one?
yeah. It's been almost a year.
Yeah.
Seems like maybe rethinking that.
Yeah, so that's where we'd be talking about, like a cluster development, or, you know, it would make sense in areas that are environmentally sensitive to think about other non-traditional layouts for subdivisions, cause if you try doing something like that in there, you know, when the wetland buffer like runs through, you know, that half of those lots, it just doesn't work as well.
So are the owners trying to sell that mobile home park?
I don't know I don't think it's actively for sale.
Oh,
I
okay.
think there's somebody interested in buying it
And-
and wants to figure out what he can do with it.
Totally, okay, and he's just trying to readjust the
Tires.
use of the property from mobile homes to something.
Potentially, I mean, kicking the tires, trying to figure out what it's worth, what can I do?
What even the options are, totally. So like the plans for the ADUs that Lacey has, you can like look at those online, the plans and everything? I'll check that out. I don't know, ever since I joined the planning committee and learned about this word called infill, my mind has just, it's like a whole new world of, I mean, I understand it's more expensive and stuff, but.
Well, it's more expensive on the front end.
Right, cause your costs are more for one property
Well,
versus,
But yeah, and then, I mean, when you go to sell it, presumably the price is gonna be higher than it would have been
sure,
out on the edge. And as long as you know your market and your audience, you should be fine. I mean, my understanding, and I'm not a developer, but my understanding is infill developers they don't make as much money, but they feel better about their product, and that's maybe a stereotype, but people who slap up, big subdivisions out in the sticks, I don't know how they,
well, and I think too,
I think there's different people that they're marketing to and all that stuff.
your infill's a lot more likely to look at your surroundings and go,
Right,
what
yeah.
fits here,
Right.
versus someone that goes, these 3 floor plans, 500 of them,
And more than
Or two
likely,
of them.
that person doesn't live in one of those houses,
Right.
right? Because A, they're too rich for it, and B, I don't wanna live there.
Right.
But there's a lot of infill developers I've seen who live in their units,
Sure.
like, hey, I'm rehabbing this unit, and then I'm gonna move into that one, and then we're gonna do the last 2 on the block.
Yeah.
That's pretty common throughout the country.
So I know I kind of asked before, but those houses on Lincoln that obviously are not lived in, do you know why those lots haven't been sold, or like,
The 2 old homes
Yeah.
that are just
yeah,
poor things.
like, does anyone know, like, why they're,
I don't know, I think that, there's there've been a lot of complaints about those houses, and that facilitated some sort of like,
Mow the
low
lawn.
budget, like facade improvements kind of
it's
thing.
so
True,
sad, cause
true,
they seem
true.
like they just probably beautiful homes in their day, but then looking at that land right there too, there's a lot of potential, and they're just sitting
It
there.
does seem
Where
that,
are
I
they
mean, it's
at on
nice and
Lincoln?
flat and big lots, I mean.
Yeah,
What's across streets, Lincoln and Custer?
maybe state,
Yeah, kind of maybe stage area. It's just there's just 2 of them, and they've got huge yards. Another one that's really.
Are they on the north end of Lincoln or on the south edge of Lincoln?
I think they would be a little bit more on the south side.
So if you were gonna, so those would be good lots for a developer to maybe buy both those and build the houses and the ADUs at the same time, like, or do something along those lines? Cause that would make it cheaper, right?
Okay, so it's right past City Hall, it's right there, you said those 2 big ones?
yeah. It's kinda near that 173 Lincoln Street, that you brought in, we're talking about people wanting to build a duplex, it's really close to that.
That's that,
One
that
of them
red
says
roof
Fountain
is
of
a
Truth Church.
That's what, that's this one is.
Yeah,
this
that's
year.
across the.
Oh, it's just.
That's the one with that
It's
weird
mislabeled,
metal
because
roof,
when I
like
Googled it, I think
entryway.
it's
Yeah.
Popping up on that house
It's
though.
like mislabeled, I think, on the Google.
Alright.
Well, we-
And there's like a garden in between the 2. Yeah, I mean, you could,
Well, and those houses are unfortunately getting really. I mean, they'll probably be under.
So those are like double lots, right? So you could build at least 4 houses there?
yeah, so the lots, most of the lots in Tenino are platted already. So if you were looking at a plat map of any of these blocks, you'd see,
Oh, They're probably
maybe
divided
8,
into parcels.
maybe 8 lots, 50 feet by 120, something like that.
Yeah, mine's 60 by 120.
Yeah, 60 by 120, that's what they would be. So all of the lots are already split up. And so one of the problems when we do development now is because our zoning code only requires 50-foot lots or 55-foot lots, all of the previously platted lots meet that standard. And so, if you know where I'm going with this, you've got, most of the lots look like, most of the blocks look like this. Alright, so you have an alleyway in the middle that's still there, even if it's not there in reality because someone built a fence or got a shed back in the back, it's still, the right of way still.
Right away.
It's actual right of way, so you're not supposed to be on it. Some right of way, some alleys in the city have been vacated, some haven't. And some just look like they've been vacated. But most of these are, I wanna say they're maybe 6 to 8. I did that halfway decent. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's 7. Whatever. They're all 60 foot by 120, right? And the zoning code only, and so when you have a legal description that says lots 1 through 4, block 15, you come in and as long as you don't have a structure sitting on one of these lot lines, let's say you have a structure sitting right here. This is an example I dealt with the other day. Let's just put it like this to make it easy. So you, Aaron, are the proud owner of lots 1, 2, 3, and 4 of block 15. That's what your legal description says. And you happen to have a house on lots 1 and 2, right? And right now, this is all fenced and your dog runs around in there. Well, you can come in for a building permit on lots 3 and 4, and you don't need to do anything with the city. You don't need a lot segregation, you don't need a boundary line adjustment, you don't need a short plat. Ordinarily in many cities, you would need a short plat. And you could actually put 2 homes on this thing. Let's say those aren't double single wides, let's just say they're nice stick-built homes. And as long as you're not crossing lot lines like that, and you meet the side yard setbacks, you just pull a building permit for lot 3 and a building permit for lot 4, and so I can't ask you to do any frontage improvements here.
Wow. Because they've already been divided.
Because they've already been divided, and they're legal lots of record, and it's no different from you selling lot 3 to him, and you selling lot 4 to him, and they do their own, maybe he sits on his for 5 years, maybe he comes in tomorrow and builds something, it doesn't matter. So there's code language that in some cities that say, if you do enough of these in a row, you're a developer, you're not really gonna live in them, we're gonna make you do frontage improvements.
Okay.
But the idea is not to make mom and pop, home buyer build 60 feet of sidewalk out in front of their house. Cause
Right.
that's 15 grand. That 15 grand is supposed to be applied to the developer that's gonna pass the cost along to the buyer,
Totally.
right? But because your code says that these pre-platted lots meet the minimum lot size standards and the dimensional standards, I can't ask you to do anything with that.
So lots 1 and 2, are those just tied up forever as long as that structure's there, or can you do a weird boundary line adjustment so that each of them still have?
Well, what was supposed to happen when that house was built is this lot line was supposed to be extinguished. They should have said combined with lot 1 and lot 2, lot 1 combined with lot 2 and block 15.
Which means that now that's one parcel.
Right.
Yeah,
Because
okay.
when you put houses on top of parcel lines, you don't have 2 legal lots of record anymore unless it's a duplex, like a 0 lot line, and you have a firewall between the 2.
There you go, okay.
Right? So, in this case, what should have happened is they should have extinguished this lot, and so it would have said, if, lots 1 together with lot 2 and lot 3 and 4 of block 15. And then,
Okay.
and then now you have, that development. But what happens is people think that parcel numbers indicate legal lots of record and vice versa, right? So I have one parcel number for lots 1 through 4 inclusive in block 15. Well, that's because I just combined it for tax purposes, because I was tired of getting 4 tax bills in the mail. And 2 of them had vacant, no use on them, and the other ones had structure on them. So there's a lot of things at play here, and that's why infill is easier and cheaper here than it could be, and certainly represents an opportunity, but it also means you're not gonna get what you might otherwise get if you were gonna hold somebody's feet to the fire and say, you're gonna have to build a curb gutter sidewalk. So some of our short plats or some of our other developments in town that we're looking at are on existing legal lots, and even though 9 houses are gonna go up, it's gonna be, we'll have to work with the developer in order to get the amenities that we need, and the way we're doing is that it's like it's one guy doing 9 lots, right? And we're gonna say, when you're roping enough of those together,
You're a developer, right? No, but I see that, though, and I can see the benefit to that, cause again, you're trying to encourage infill and you're trying to encourage growth for John Q. Citizen. So, yeah. But then, yeah, you're right, the developer though, he's making money, he's passing the charge on, so,
Right.
yeah, let's do what
Are
we
you talking about those lots on Central Street? Would they, by the church, would they not have had to do sidewalks and stuff? Or are you talking about something?
we're still working on that question. So
Is
that
that one
could be an
parcel?
example
Or
of this.
I mean, is that one parcel now? Or like on each side of the street? Or
Currently, there are 2 tax parcel numbers, one on the north side of the street and one on the south side of the street. The property owner is saying, I have 6 lots on the south end and 4 on the north end. So originally, you're just like, oh, it's a subdivision. No, because they're all legal lots of record. But he's proposing to do some boundary line adjustments on the north end. And when you do that, all bets are off, right? When you have to start moving parcel line. Not all bets are off, I shouldn't say it like that. There's more room for us to ask for a fair accommodation on public infrastructure.
Has anybody said anything to you about that lot for sale, kind of where that high school sign is? Across from the
The-
70-60?
Yeah, that's what I'm watching, the 3 lots, it's 3 lots
Yeah.
together, they're selling as one. It's that whole
I
grassy
haven't
area.
seen, it's Kython Street? What is that? Why would they pull that? I've had questions on McClellan.
where
That-
is?
McClellan is
So you know
right
the high
here.
school sign?
Oh
The-
yeah, I
the-
know. I know what
yeah.
you're talking about now. Yeah, it's owned by the Johnson.
Oh, okay.
Or something.
I've had questions on the McClellan lots that are right, I wanna say, that guy right there, that long one right there. And the city, those 3 lots right there are the city's,
City shop.
shop. The big parcel behind the city shop is for sale, this parcel right here.
So that's behind the backyard of all those houses.
Yeah, so you see that there's no alley there, that alley, see there's an alley on this one, between Richmond and McClellan, there's no alley, it's been vacated. But all of the property owners up front on Richmond are using that alley to get into their garages or whatever.
Oh, they're right.
And because they have easements just for them, that alley is fully located on those 5 lots. So in order to get to this lot, you're gonna have to either negotiate, is that the right one? No. That one right here. You're gonna have to either negotiate an easement with those 5 property owners to get access to your property, or you're gonna have to try to punch through that existing right of way where McClellan's at, which kinda dives back down into,
It's like a well. Again, it's like the riparian area.
or get access across the city shop property.
So here's a question for you, so like that property that's right over here, right off of Sussex in front of the high school. So that would be technically probably commercial, in our historic area, but when it comes to residential, do they have to follow any sort of like aesthetic, I mean, like, I know like with commercial, buildings have to incorporate sandstone and they have to do these things. That's pretty close to the downtown strip, but I'm wondering if a developer wanted to buy that and just put a bunch of ugly monstrosities in there.
So the historic character zone is this solid, also black line, just not quite as thick as the UGA line that runs down central Sussex, you know, wraps around here and comes back on Lincoln. It's about a block off of Sussex in each direction.
Oh, okay. And
So-
there's the high school, right?
This is the elementary school,
Middle school.
middle school's there, high schools.
Okay, so
um,
those lots are covered in that.
Yeah,
that area.
this is a mess, really.
Yeah.
When I talked to the superintendent, I'm like, you guys should really take care of this. They've got the gym's like right there,
Mhm.
right? It's running through the middle right away in this funky old, maybe
road.
road,
Oh, weird.
whatever. So I don't know exactly where the parcels you're talking about are,
They're-
but
They're kinda like right on the north side of Sussex, just right
I
there.
think they're in that
So
commercial
if they're-
one zone.
okay, cause if they're in commercial 3, they probably couldn't do a subdivision like you're talking about.
I think it just speaks into the commercial one.
So the commercial one's like a sort of a peach salmon
Oh, okay.
colored like
Oh
thing
yeah,
in
that's
there.
that weird intersection with Ritter, you can see.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know where those are at, but anything that's inside this, the historic district has got the design guideline, requirements. Some of the people have, you know, are concerned a little bit, cause Lincoln here is 2 blocks off of, Sussex, isn't it 2 blocks off?
It's just separated by the alley. There's a
Yeah.
Sussex Alley, Lincoln.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's right, so it's a full block off of it. And then maybe it's this one on the backside of Central at, those ones are a full block off. So they're fronting on Central, it feels like a residential neighborhood, but yet they're still part of this block, so. I know when Fred did his little inventory to set this up, you know, there's rationale for it, so I'm not questioning that at all, but there's,
I think all of this is owned by, one property owner, Jekyll's, who used to own a grocery store right at that Y. I think it is that actually. That big open lot where the grocery store septic system used to be, but now it's obviously just a big open lot with that madrona tree in it, you know?
Across on the north side, or the south side of Sussex.
That's all owned by one owner, including that one Rambler house that's like, if you're coming down 99 and you get to the intersection with 507, it's like, there's that one Rambler slightly to the right, on Raglis, I think. That is also owned by the same person.
one kind of quick thing before, I'm
I
done, is, the other hard part with frontage improvements is if your whole road is just asphalt and then a ditch and a driveway, right? And then one guy comes in and you make him put a sidewalk in, that's tough. And those are the types of people who show up to council and say, this is sidewalk to nowhere, right? You're making me put a sidewalk in and nobody in a quarter mile of me has a sidewalk.
And they'll probably talk like undue burden, you know, right, okay.
Right, so that's the balance you have to try to strike, and that's why it's more typical when someone comes in with a series of developments and just going boom, 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 we're like, alright, well, it's not just 60 feet now, it's 360 feet or 6,000 feet or whatever, and now you're gonna get sidewalks on an entire side of a street, for a quarter mile.
were you talking about some people, like in this example, would be, building the house and all of that, knowing that someday in the future, maybe they would be contributing to sidewalks? as it gets
That's an
sorted out?
option for, you know, that's called like fee in lieu of. So like, I will give you my money that it would have cost me to do it, and eventually you build it. Developers do that.
That's
So-
what Hidden
so
Meadows is
That's what
doing.
Hidden Meadows.
Yeah, that discussion with him.
Right, so that discussion with Hidden Meadows was, you know, almost a year ago now, but it's fee in lieu of for sidewalks, cause they're saying like, look, why would we put sidewalks out in front here, there's no connection. So we'll give you the 18 grand, and you promised that when you grow out this way, that you're gonna put them in.
And from a developer standpoint, that's actually a pretty good deal,
That's
right?
gonna be more expensive.
Cause you're literally just handing off well, yeah, and then also, you never know what's gonna happen when you get in there, right? I mean, so, you know, you're basically just saying, hey, you take care of it, I'll pay you today's cost, and whenever you wanna do it, it's your headache.
But so infill provisions, you can write up whatever you want, as long as there's we talk Constitution very much about the nexus, you know, that it has to be reasonable and proportionate,
Right.
have a nexus, so like You know, it's kinda like the punishment fits a crime, right? You can't get the death penalty for stealing a candy bar. You know, I can't make you fix all the city's problems because you're building one house, right? It's gotta be, reasonable, and there has to be connection to what you're asking me to do for what I'm causing as far as an impact. So if I'm a single house, you can't make me pave the whole street, cause that's not proportionate, that's not a reasonable to my impact. So those are the types of things I think you know, I'm seeing like a marketing campaign here where, you know, infill is easy in Tenino. That's a probably not unreasonable approach to what you've got here. The flip side of that is infill might not get you all the development styles that you're looking for, and so you'll wanna be aware of that. You know, if you've got a legally platted lot and, you know, you're gonna drop a house down and we're not gonna make you put in curb gutter sidewalk, at least orient the garage off the alley, right? If you have an alley, you need to do that. That's kind of our balance for this thing. So you do your front porch and have the house oriented towards the street like a row house and put the access in the back. Cause you're not doing frontage improvements, right? So we're not getting the rest of the style that we wanted in this development, right? And so you do that instead. You can write it up as long as you relate it back to the, you know, to the reasonable and proportional nexus. Covered a lot of ground tonight.
No, that,
Yeah. Good discussion.
Yeah.
We're done?
Yep.
Alright. Meeting adjourned.
Before we go, Will, I could recap here real quick with what we've covered, and then you can give me feedback on whether you wanna keep going. So we did like a GMA 101, I think it was in September. I did the origins of growth management in October. I did, SEPA and environmental review in November. You remember that, we did checklists. In December, we didn't have a meeting. In January, you heard from, so what was in January?
Was that one?
Shorelines. We did shorelines in January. February was sustainability. March is annexation. The last one I had was infill development for small cities, if you believe it.
Seems like a great segue.
It seems like that
Yeah.
would be the next one to do, and then maybe we start working on ADUs in May. I mean, I can put some stuff up, ahead of time.
I really like these more, kind of like informal breakout work sessions that we do. I'm learning.
Is there somewhere too, like a image of all of the lots, how they are divided in the city limits?
There might even be one in your zoning code.
But like Thurston County geodata is the county map, and it's the assessor's sort of way of, you know, taxing each lot, so that's where all the lot lines.
Yeah, if you're asking the question, how can I see how Tenino itself is split up, that's the answer. If you wanna see an illustration of different lot styles and, what is meant by lot segregation, combination, subdivisions, that's in your zoning code, there's actually quite a few illustrations in there.
Okay.
So, yeah, that, we had talked about, and this was back in, I think, August, of when we started setting these training sessions up. And we've made our way through a lot of them. We haven't done infill, and I think that's the one you said you wanted to do. That and historic preservation briefing, I haven't set up at all.
Okay.
So,
That was my least important, I guess, for me personally.
Because it's our preservation.
I
I'm
think
interested in it, but.
that's where I am. It's like, I'm interested in it. I'd love to hear about it. Especially that's kind of
Everybody's doing line with mine.
something we got going for us, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
One of our strengths.
Is there any takeaways from the community sustainability conversation last month that apply to what we're talking about?
Yeah, good question, I wasn't here, so, anything,
I mean, like wise use of land, obviously, and, you know, like trying to have people walkable communities.
And
That'd
that,
be my guess.
right, yeah, we talked about that, about, you know, community, a little bit of community planning and trying to make sure that, yeah, things are, you know, easy to get to, easy access. I'm trying to think what else
Yeah.
we were,
I feel like life's so crazy sometimes, I have to refresh my memory.
Yeah, I'm kinda drawing a blank a little bit, but
It's been busy.
In the same way that Lacey, you should probably turn the camera on, okay?
yeah,
I've been careful about speaking too candidly, cause that thing's on.
it's always in the back of my mind.
It's like, I'm about to say something really mean about the county, I better not